Hello, my friends. I'm Robert Wallace, and this is The Chew, where we ask, am I choosing the way of Jesus, or am I choosing my own way? Today, we're looking at application and outcome. We will not always see the positive outcome from our application of the way Jesus is calling us to live by loving our enemies and praying for those who persecute us. We can rest assured that God is at work, that the Holy Spirit's moving, and that things are taking place, even though we may not see the outcome we're looking for or expect. Jesus himself experienced that. You may be reminded, as I was, of the time that Jesus healed 10 lepers, and yet only one of them returned. That's in Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. Is it unreasonable for Jesus to have healed 10 lepers and to expect all 10 of them to return praising God? I don't think so. However, only one did. So Jesus did not see the outcome that he was expecting. How often do we fail to see the outcome that we're expecting? And sometimes unrealized expectations can cause us to develop an attitude, to be less loving to our enemies, to want to pray less for those who persecute us. And yet we have to realize that we're called to go on, that we're called to continue, that Jesus doesn't say to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us if it works. That's not what he says. He says that we need to do these two things, that this is the way of God, this is the way of heaven. So when we love our neighbors as ourselves, when we love our enemies as God does, good things will happen. We just may not see the result of them. How about Saul, known better to us as the Apostle Paul? Now, Saul was an enemy of Jesus' disciples. I mean, let's make no bones about it. He was out. He was persecuting the followers of the way. It was his mission to wipe them out. He considered them to be enemies of God, enemies of the one true God, and he was on a mission. Then Saul meets Jesus on the Damascus Road, and his realization of who Jesus really is came to fruition. And he knew that Jesus was the prophesied Messiah. It changed his whole world. Yet he was struck blind and he wasn't able to see. So then Jesus taps Ananias on the shoulder and says, I need you to go pray over and lay hands on Saul so he'll regain his sight. And Ananias is saying, wait a minute. Wait a minute, Jesus. He's the guy who's killing us. He's the guy who's putting us in jail. He's the one who's persecuting us. And Jesus sent him and he went. He obeyed and he did what Jesus asked him to do. He was obedient. He prayed for an enemy and he loved an enemy, and he prayed for the persecutor and loved the persecutor. Saul was both of these things, and Ananias was faithful and obedient. Perhaps a more recent example will strike a chord with some of you. Some of you may know, many of you may know, Corrie ten Boom. She was in a Nazi concentration camp as a girl. She lost most of her family. And after the war was over with, she used to go around lecturing on the grace of God. Well, at the end of one such lecture, a man came up to shake her hand. She found out that he was a former prison guard at one of the concentration camps. Listen to what she says. Only by asking God to love through her did she find the grace to take his hand and offer Christian forgiveness. What's my point? My point is, my friends, we cannot do this alone. We must have the power of the Holy Spirit within us to do what God is calling us to do, to do as Jesus says, to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. The question is, are we willing to do what Jesus is calling us to do? Am I willing to trust God with His love working in and through me? Am I willing to be vulnerable to disappointment and hurts by loving and praying obediently? Do I want to see the power of the Holy Spirit in my life to do what God is calling me to do? What action am I being nudged by the Holy Spirit to take today? Am I going to choose the way of Jesus that leads to life and life in the full, or am I going to choose my own way? I'm praying for us as we carefully consider today's chew and all of the chews for this week, that we're going to invite the Holy Spirit to give us eyes to see and ears to hear God's truth from His Word. That we're going to have receptive hearts and minds to receive these truths. And then we'll take a step of faith today with the same boldness, commitment, and courage of Jesus to do what the Holy Spirit is leading us to do in faithful obedience to Jesus. I pray you'll have a wonderful day, my friends. Go in the peace of God. Blessings to you. Bye for now.